Hi guys, it's Kelly here and I'm back with another video. Today's video is featuring some products from the new release from Pinkfresh Studios. This is the Garden Tapestry, what do they call them? I think they call them suites because they release like 3 or 4 products for each one, and then I love because then you can pick and choose what works for you. And then this is Pure Joy, which is actually the release's namesake, but there's lots of really, really great stuff. Here, what I was pointing out with the die is they have a die that cuts out the individual images, or they have a die that will cut out the whole image as one piece, which I love the versatility. Here, I am using cold press watercolor cardstock. This one is from Altenew, and with every watercolor paper, there's kind of a rougher side and a smoother side. For both of the watercolor pieces today, I am working on the smoother side. This is the Garden Tapestry stamp. I totally fell in love with this. I think it's something that can be a focal point or be a background piece. Today it's going to be a background piece, but I just was really, really drawn to it. So for this one, like I said, this is my background piece of my watercolor card, and so I am going to be stamping in a white pigment ink and heat embossing in white on white cardstock. We will see bits and pieces of this, like kind of peeking out, but it is not meant to be the main focal point. The main focal point is the Pure Joy with the flowers and the cute little bird and all of that. This card, I don't know if this card would be considered my usual style. It is a little bit, you know, it's clean and it's got the bright colors. It has more of a, like a romantic or magical kind of feel to it, just a very soft feel, but it still has those bolder kind of colors. So we're going to be talking a lot about watercolor today. This is not a what I should do, what I shouldn't do here. It's really more of a, when you're doing this, this is the result you're going to get. If you want this, this is the technique that you need to kind of use. It's been a long time for me since I've really sat down and tried to like genuinely watercolor something I was going to be happy with. We're going to be talking about wet on dry techniques and wet on wet techniques. So just kind of a all over watercolor kind of card, kind of technique video, right? So here, once my stamping was done, and I always stamp them twice in my white pigment ink, this time I used the Hero Arts Unicorn ink, but that's pretty much, like, I will swap that out for the Honeybee Brilliant White. I like both of them equally as well. Here I am, this is the actual Pure Joy stamp. I am using the Gina K Amalgam ink in Whisper. Again, I will swap this out with the Honeybee No Line Coloring ink. I like both of them equally as well. For me, with No Line Coloring ink, I do tend to stamp it multiple times, as I do like to be able to see my line. Especially on camera, I want you to be able to see my line as well. But if you want a line that's going to completely disappear, a no line ink will not give you that. This line will stay even once you put the color on top of it. Now, most of the time you won't be able to see it because your color will be bolder. But if you're going for some lighter washes, you know, that ink will grab a hold of the color. If you want something that's going to completely disappear, I would recommend stamping in Distress ink, as that is water soluble, and when you add water to it, it will completely go by the wayside. So I've stamped that in my No Line ink, and now I'm going to stamp it again on vellum. This time I'm using gold pigment ink for some gold heat embossing, and this is because I'm obsessed with metallics lately. You ever just find yourself like in a, I don't want to call it a rut, because rut sounds like a bad thing, and I don't think it's a bad thing, where you're just like in a groove where you're really into something specific. For me right now, it's totally metallics. I'm super into them. I like seeing them in my cards. I like the amount of shine that it adds. And so I am stamping this, again, gold pigment ink with gold embossing powder. With any kind of vellum, you do want to make sure that you're treating with an anti-static tool because they are known to be super staticky. Also, here you can see I kind of double stamped. That was wet because... That's because in between I didn't clean my stamp. So don't be like me. Clean your stamp in between so it doesn't leave just a random little line. But nonetheless, these are going to be tucked into the background. I cleaned it up as best I could and I moved on with my life. But then always with vellum, I make sure that I'm preheating my heat gun so that it doesn't warp as well. So these are my Daniel Smith watercolors. I keep them in a Tim Holtz inking palette. I am just spraying them down with a mister to, you know, get them wet and the pigment's kind of moving. I have a clean and a dirty water cup or bowl, if you will, and then we're going to get right into the painting. Now, all of my videos, every single video that you watch of mine, unless it's stated otherwise, is sped up to 200%. That's just because real time takes a long time. And so a lot of times when I'm coloring something or when I am, you know, watercoloring, I speed it up even more. This one is not. This one always is at 200%. So I feel like it's a really good speed for learning and for us to be able to talk about a lot of different things. But I just wanted to note that in case you are like, well, hers is going faster than mine, or, you know, it's because it is sped up. If you want to see it in real time, YouTube does have a speed adjuster that you can adjust that and then make it slower by 50%, and then that would be real time. Okay, let's talk about what we're doing. So here, this is sap green. And I'm just going in with it, just its natural pigment. And then you'll see as we go along, I am working between mostly the sap green and an ultramarine turquoise. But every once in a while, I will add in a little bit of yellow, which in my case is a cerulean or a cobalt yellow. But I like a lot of color variation. So you can see over here, we've switched to the turquoise as our base. And now I'm going to drop some of that sap green in. Let's talk about what's happening. So even though I put my color down at the base of my leaf for all four of these, I can count, I swear. You can see it looks very one note. The reason it looks very one note is a couple of things. One, when I put my color down, okay, and then I am bringing the clean water to my paper, I'm bringing the clean water to the pigment, but instead of just leaving it, like once the water touches the pigment, I'm walking away, I'm moving the pigment around. This is going to give me a flatter wash. This isn't necessarily the type of watercolor that I like, but that doesn't matter. But that's what's causing it. The other thing is when I am going to start the next leaf, I am not always rinsing off my brush. Consequently, I'm carrying pigment from one leaf to another, which will again create more of a flat wash. If you want something that is more like variegated, you're going to have a lot of lighter lights and a lot of darker darks, then at this stage, like you want to bring the water from where you want it to be lightest. In my case, that's the tip of the leaf. You want to bring the water down to the darkest part. And then once they start mingling, once you've brought the clean water to the pigment, you have to walk away. It's going to look hideous. That's fine. Watercolor is always prettiest after it's dried. Here, what I'm doing is this petal got a little dark. So I rinsed off my brush. I pulled off the excess water so that it was a dry brush. And then I can go in with that dry brush and suck up any of the extra pigment. This is a great trick to know in case you do get too much water down or too much pigment down. And alternatively, you could blot it with a paper towel or a baby wipe. Baby wipe, I would go more with the paper towel because the baby wipe is already going to be damp and you risk maybe kind of spreading it. But that is a way for you to pick up the pigment. So if you want more of a flat wash, if you want more of a general all over color, then when you're bringing it down, you want to move the pigment yourself. This way of watercoloring is usually what are in our kind of industry, what I hear card makers complain about the most is that they don't understand why all of their leaves, petals, whatever, look like they're all one color, and they want the color variation, or they want the variation in tones and lights and darks, and they're not sure where they're going wrong. If you are a person who struggles with control and you want to control the watercolor, this will be the biggest struggle for you because it doesn't look pretty. And so our natural inclination is to continue to manipulate it. Leave it alone. Watercolor is buildable. You can always go back in and do another layer if for some reason you really do hate it, but you have to let the water do the work. Let the water do its thing. So let's talk about what's happening with this flower. This flower has several different petals, and I'm coloring them at all the same time. So even though I put my pigment down at the top and the bottom, and then I added my clean water, because I did it all at one time, it's going to blend into each other. I'm going to lose those individual petals. And you can see that here. It just looks like one big blob. So again, I'm going to rinse my brush off. I'm going to wipe off the excess water, and I'm going to go back in and absorb some of that pigment. And then very little amounts, like very, very little of the darker color where I want it to be. I'm going to drop in some clean water in the hopes of breaking it up, and then I'm going to walk away. Because in watercolor, if you work next to two areas that are wet, they will bleed in together. There will be no separation. So if you feel like your flower, tree, leaf, whatever is very blobby, you might be working too closely next to each other if one is blending into the other. For this flower, I'm doing something very similar, but instead of making sure that I moved all of the pigment, I tried very hard to just leave some white breaks. And so in order to be able to do that, to leave some breaks, I personally need to work with less water. And you can see as I'm doing the flowers, I'm not doing the leaves that are right next to them. I'm jumping around. I'm doing other things. Same thing with the one where I did the leaves. I didn't go in and do that flower because you have to give them time to dry or they'll bleed into each other. For this bird's little belly, I did do more of a wet on wet. So I went in with clean water. Not a lot. You don't want it bubbling. You don't want it pooling. You just want it to be wet enough that the pigment will move. And then I brought in the color where I wanted it to be the darkest. Here, this back wing. Now, this back wing is not, it sounds like I'm saying bat wing, doesn't it? The back wing isn't touching the belly, so those two areas are fine to work on each other. Again, I put the pigment where I wanted it to be the darkest, where that wing is tucked up under the body. And then I did drop in a little bit of, it's not a true, I struggle with pronunciation, quinacridone magenta. It does have a little bit of that yellow mixed into it. And so it's more of like a corally color. But don't be afraid to mix your colors. When I first bought my Daniel Smith watercolors, and make sure you shop around for good prices. Okay, let me just say that, because there are some craft stores that are not fine art stores that will sell you a 5 milliliter tube for $10, and you could go to an actual art store like Blick Arts and get a 15 milliliter tube for $11. So just make sure and I know sometimes, it's worth paying the price because maybe you're already ordering from there and you're already paying the shipping, but just be smart about your dollars. So here, These, again, this flower is made of multiple petals. So now I've separated them into 3. I'm not doing the one in the middle, and the other 2 are not touching. So doing this is allowing me to keep that separation between my petals. This other one is not a lost cause, okay? Just because we did our base layer as one and it kind of bled into each other, because we've used a no-line coloring ink, we still have the lines. And so consequently, we can go back in, add another layer over it, and kind of revive that separation that we previously lost. So I'm going to do the same thing with this one over here. I'm going to go in with a little bit of a darker color and put that in, you know, where I want the shadows to be. And you can see oftentimes I'm going back to other images and adding little bits here and there. All of these things are kind of a work in progress. So as long as they're still wet, you can add new color to them. If they're dry, then that's going to be the beginning of a new layer, and you do need to be aware of that it won't blend in with the bottom layer anymore. For this portion of the bird, now everything else is dry, his tail, his belly, his wings, so I can go in and, you know, do this portion of it. This is pretty much just completely unadulterated ultramarine turquoise, and then I did drop in a little bit more of that kind of coral color. I went a little crazy on his belly, and I didn't love that, but I'm going to let it dry. I'm going to come back and go back over it with some teal. But again, you don't have to watercolor any of these ways. You can watercolor whatever way makes you happy. I just kind of wanted to touch on some of the things and why they are happening, so that way when you're going in to do your watercolor, you know why it's happening. And if you don't love it, you can adjust it. And if you do love it, you know how to replicate it. So here, I pretty much painted those in solid, the little leaves on the left. For these other ones over here, I'm just going to go around the edge. I'm going to put clean water in the middle, and then I'm going to drop in just a little bit more color. Notice how I didn't go over the whole leaf. And again, I'm going to drop in some more teal just around the edges. I didn't go over the whole leaf. In this one, I'm letting the water do the work. And you can see, if you watch it, you know, as it's drying, that's going to create that kind of really beautiful watercolor variation that you see, where there's kind of some open spaces and not every little bit is covered with color. If you like that look, then you do need to master the art of leaving it alone. You do need to master the art of leaving it alone, because that is how you will get that particular look, and having it just kind of be more open, and it's kind of breathing a bit more, where it's not as heavy and saturated. It doesn't mean you don't have any color variation. I obviously still have color variation in that leaf, but it's not as heavy as this one that's up top here, which I like that one too, but I like them for different reasons. So a good kind of rule of thumb, you know, for like leaves is, you know, put your pigment down where you want it to be the darkest, put your clean water on the opposite end, or if you're doing something where you have color at the tip and the base, put your clean water in the middle, and then just let it go. Don't manipulate it any further. Let the water do the work, and that's most of the time how you're going to get that, what I think people look for as like a desired type of result with their watercolors. Now, I don't think I'm going to use all of these. Okay, all of these pieces, I'm going to use them. The kinds that have a flat wash, the kinds that have a ton of variation, the kinds that don't. Like, I think they're all pretty. Their colors match really well. But I guess I wanted to kind of tackle the topic because I know sometimes we're all just looking for a very specific look, or that's a specific look that we find more beautiful than other types of looks, or a different type of feel. And so that's why I went over it. So now that the other two side of the flowers are dry, I'm going to go back in and get this middle one so everybody will be nice and separated from each other, adding much more pigment to the base. And then you'll see I'm going to drop in the darker pigment with the pink. I'm going to drop in some yellow, and then I'm going to walk away. And that petal right there is hideous. It does not look good right now. It looks polka dotted. But again, with that leaf, as it dries, we're going to see the water kind of do the work, and it didn't need any help from me. One of the things I think that gets forgotten a lot, which will make most of us much happier with our watercolor paintings, is after everything is dry, you have to go back in and put the details. If you don't go back in and put the details, it will seem much more blobby. So in this case, I'm going back in and putting the lines back into the leaves. Now, if you want them to be bolder, you want to wait until your items, your images, are completely dry. Like in this case, for the bird's eye, I needed to make sure that was completely dry, or that black for his eye would spread into the rest of his feathers. Did not want that. That must be dry before I add the eye back in. But if you want a softer line in your leaves, or, in your petals of your florals, you can go in, not when it's wet, when it's 3/4 of the way dry, and have a softer line produced, because it will still kind of blend out into the area that's still damp. But if you're looking for a hard line, which is typically how I do it, it's definitely how I do it when I do stems, or like I said, that eye for the bird, what do I want to call it? Like the structural portion of the bird, to give it more detail, I will go in and do that when it's dry. When you're doing that, you definitely want to have less water, more pigment. So it should be a much thicker mix of paint to water. You don't want it to be so thick that it's not moving, like it's not painting smooth when you put the color down, but you do want it to be pretty concentrated. So that way you're not having a ton of extra, like, kind of bleeding out, especially for these. These do have a pretty thin line. So we're just about done with this. This is the detail layer for the birds, just putting that in. The birds, there's only one bird, Kelly. And then once I get the details for the other things, the florals and stuff, then we're going to move on to the painting of the background, which is a different technique than what we've been doing here. This is much more detailed. So I hope you guys are hanging in. The last time I talked to you, I told you I was sick. It's been over a week. I still don't sound like myself. I'm still coughing stuff up. I do not know what I had. I know it's not COVID because I took that test, but I don't know if it's flu A, flu B. It's not strep because I don't have the stuff in the back of my throat, but this is a hanger-oner, man. I told Nathan on the way to school today, I'm so sick of being sick. Oh, man, which makes me just so much more grateful for the fact that I'm normally really healthy. So here with a wet on wet, I went in with a much bigger brush. You saw it. I think it's a 1 inch or 3/4 inch flat brush. Put down quite a bit of water. You have to remember, wherever you put the water is where your pigment will flow. So only put down water where you want your pigment to go. Then I started adding in that same turquoise and then the same sap green to the background. I knew that I wanted to kind of fill up the center so we would be able to see all this really beautiful detail from the garden tapestry. But I also wanted to work at a diagonal because I have these floral, leaves and bunches that will go around my circle, and they will be kind of catty corner to each other. So I knew that I needed it to go at a diagonal to support those and kind of anchor them. Don't be afraid to go a bit bolder with your color. Watercolor dries back much softer, so there's a lot of this that's going to be really soft, and I needed some areas that were going to be a bit bolder to contrast them. Once it's dry, I told you I have a love affair right now with metallics. And so I'm going to go back in. This is the metallic watercolor set from Altenew. I've had this for a few years now. There are 14 colors, and I just have them swatched out. I pull out my swatch, I pull out my heat embossing, I see which one is going to match the best. And then for me, it was the gold pearl. The enchanted gold is a bit more yellow. So I went with the gold pearl. I painted in the circle, around all of the kind of beautiful tapestry. And then I just went in and when I tell you there is no rhyme or reason, there is no rhyme or reason. I just went in and randomly painted like some centers of flowers here, some buds here. Because I don't have a lot of color in the top and the bottom, it does make those details a little bit hard to see. So I purposely concentrated on adding little bits of gold to that as well. But there isn't a right or wrong way to do this. This is basically just trying to get some more metallic to tie everything together and, of course, add some more shine, which makes my heart happy. Do I think the card would look the same without it? No, I don't. Do I think the card would be pretty without it? Yes, I do. So if you're not a person who loves the metallics, that's okay. Just skip them. You could do the heat emboss. Like if you love the vellum leaves, you could do a white instead of a metallic, or you could do a different color metallic. I feel gold is warmer, and I have a lot of cool tones in here. Really, the only warmth I have is coming from my florals. So bringing in the gold in the sentiment and the leaves brings in some warm tones and creates some contrast, which creates some interest. So now that everything is done, I'm going to do my die cutting. And here again, that one would cut out the whole piece as one, which I love. I love having things that are versatile, but I want them as separate pieces because I'm not going to use them how they're originally intended. So I'm going to die cut these out and then die cut out the vellum. And then I'm going to kind of start putting things together. In this case, I really wanted the leaves, like the gold portion of the leaves. Don't feel like you can't trim these. You absolutely can. I just cut off the flowers where I didn't need them, and I just wanted the leaves. There is one in the top right behind the bird that has a little flower on it. I kept that. I felt like it made sense. Once I had this how I wanted it to look, I went ahead and tried out some sentiments. That is why I take the time to lay it out before I do my sentiment. Ultimately, I settled on Life is Better with Friends, which fit perfectly and is very cute. Again, true. And so I'm going to heat emboss this in gold on the same watercolor cardstock. The reason I chose to do the same cardstock is simply because watercolor cardstock is often as much as they try, is still a little bit off white. And so if I came in here with my Nina 80-pound solar white cardstock, the whites wouldn't match. And so in order to make sure that my whites still match, I'm just using the leftovers here to do my sentiment so that everything is matchy-matchy. I also cut out a few more layers of the die, not with anything on them, but just so that I could stack them underneath it and give my sentiment a little bit of lift. So anywho, yeah, been sick for a while. Very, very tired. And you know how it is, like when you're sick, it just takes you a while to just kind of get back on your feet where you aren't totally exhausted every time you're doing just regular household things. So, plus then Caitlin started to get sick. What night was that? Last Thursday, I think. She woke up in the middle of the night and she was stuffy. And now today, I feel so bad. Like it's terrible when your kids get sick. It's terrible. It's more terrible, when you know that you're the person who gave it to them. Now I got mine from Peanut, who basically was sick for a day and a half. Like, kids are so resilient. And here's me, like good old mom, got obviously years more life experience under my belt, and I'm sick with it for now over a week, 8 days. And he was over in a day and a half. Jelly Bean does seem to be, she came down like on Thursday. Hers never seemed like it got nearly as bad as mine. Thank God. Thank you, Jesus. But now Eric today is like, my throat hurts and I'm super congested. I was like, oh my gosh, like it just managed to get all of us. But I do not know how, when your child has a cold or when you have a cold, how you don't spread them between each other. Like, I mean, even with all of the washing of the hands and the Lysol and like, because you have to care for them, especially when they're that little, she's just a toddler. So of course I'm picking her up and, I'm wiping her nose and all that stuff. So yeah, sickness is running through our house. Thankfully, it's not the worst one ever. So I'll just be grateful that for the most part, we're still functional. So all of these went down flat. For the vellum, I do not put any adhesive where you can see it. I only put the adhesive where it's tucked under. For the little birdie, I did pop him up on some foam tape. Don't be afraid to cut your foam tape to make it, whatever shape you need it to be. And then, for the sentiment, like I said, I cut out a couple of those and then I stacked them up. And this is just going to give it a little bit of lift without me having to cut little teeny tiny foam pieces. So once that was all put together, I can put that into, it's the center-ish, it's the lower center. But doesn't, like, just looking at this, doesn't it have like a very kind of like romantic feel, this watercolor painting? I'm really happy with the way that it came out. In order to kind of bolster up the look of, that was my elbow, by the way. I'm fine. In order to bolster up the look and kind of play off that kind of mystical, magical, ethereal kind of thing, I did add a couple of little gemstones, and then that's it. That's the whole card. So I hope that you guys learned a little something about your own watercolor style, or maybe some things that you want to try. There is a blog hop with prizes. I will link that below. If you've hung out until this long, thank you so much. I always appreciate your time, and I will catch you guys on the next video. Bye.